Keep your fingers crossed. Text anybody you know on the committee to get on over here. Everybody on the committee, look in your folder. There's a notice. I think everybody's received these emails in the mail. A dinner tonight with the House Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications Committee at Rathman Steak, 6:30 to 8:30. That's over there on the Beltline on Krog Street. So I hope everybody that's able will come by that dinner. We do have a quorum now, and so we're going to run down our agenda pretty much in the order that we have it. There are a couple of bills that have asked to be held, but we'll get started with House Bill 34, Representative Washburn. These are in order in your folders, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing this bill, and members of the committee. House Bill 34 seeks to establish a system for professional licensing boards to electronically track continuing education compliance. It is designed to streamline this process and help with some of our licensing issues there. The benefits of the bill are that it provides enhanced efficiency, improved compliance, cost savings, and public protection. The other thing I would add is you heard this bill last year and passed it out of committee, and it passed out of the Rules Committee, I believe, and just did not make it to the floor. So it came last year. So I'll be glad to entertain any questions. I know that's a brief presentation, but it's a very short bill.
What was your House vote on the floor? You remember?
I do not recall, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. It was by a large margin.
I don't remember any controversy last year, and I remember us passing it out of this committee.
Right.
Essentially, this is to track your CLE type requirements, continuing education.
Yes, sir. It requires, it permits Secretary of State's office to engage or establish this tracking solution, so to speak, and it requires the folks that they will be tracking to file their CE with this system so that the licensees can track where they are easier. And of course, we think it will make it easier, the reporting a lot easier.
Okay. Paige, my handy dandy admin, said it passed 171 to 2. Colton Moore's over in the Senate now, though, isn't he?
Sir.
I said Colton Moore's over here now. Who's your other no over there? So what are you trying to do? What's the problem that you're addressing here? Are people not getting their CE, or are they getting relicensed without having gotten it? Are we trying to tighten up or loosen up?
Well, I think to say it briefly, it is the year 2025, and it is best to track these sort of things in some sort of an online solution rather than the old method of trying to use a phone call to find out how many CE hours you need, and then to complete the CE and then send in some sort of a written proof of that. We just think it would be much more efficient to do that.
Okay. Well, any questions? Senator Ginn, you're recognized for a question. I'll get you next, Senator Dolezal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Washburn, I believe you're a real estate agent, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
The two questions. One of them, the currently as a licensed real estate person in the legislature, are you required to do continuing education, or you get exemption because you're in the legislature? Or are there prior other legislators that might get an exemption in their previous rules?
Well, Senator, fortunately for me, I do not have to do it because I've been in the real estate business for 50 years this year.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm one of few that,
or something like that.
I'm one of few that does not, and yes, we do have to have continuing education, and we are able to do it by tracking it online and so forth, and filing our completions online.
Okay, and the other question was down there, lines 36 and 37, where you're talking about rules. Let's just say that a board adopts a rule that you don't like, or that whatever organization, whatever license they're holding doesn't like. What's their appeals process for addressing that? Does that come back to the legislature to address, or, you know, I could imagine there might be situations where a board might say, well, you know, you got to be able to skip and rub your hand at the head at the same time. I don't know, you know, but to me, if there's a question about how they adopt rules, how's that addressed?
Gabe Sterling is here with the Secretary of State's office, and I will ask Gabe to assist me in answering that question about how that would be handled.
All right, Gabe, come on up and take the podium. Let's educate us.
Well, in this particular case, the rules are talking about rules promulgated just around the CE. All boards already have the ability to pass rules, and they have hearings and they are adopted. And honestly, I've never seen anybody, after a rule's been passed, then try to fight it, but I assume it would be either A, legislative route, or B, a judicial route if they were going outside the bounds of the law.
The reason I asked the question is I know some a colleague of mine has a bill who serves on this committee that you adopt a rule that influences cost. You know, there's things that could happen with that. I'm just kind of curious, you know, how it's addressed. Would that never had an issue with it thus far?
Well, there's always going to be issues with some people like rules, some people don't like rules, but normally they come to a consensus and the boards reflect that. There are times when the associations and the boards are at odds, and we have seen that before, but again, the rulemaking follows the same rulemaking laws we've had in the state for, hell, 100 years, 50 years, depending on how long the boards have been there. And on occasion, as a specific situation now, in the Supreme Court case on the lactation consultants, basically the Supreme Court said none of the boards can pass rules unless they address specifically health and safety, which is the reason for the board's existence. So we've been talking to the governor's office and other boards about them having to review all these rules to make sure they follow only those things, or the third leg of that stool, which is financial protection of Georgians. But again, when it comes to the CE tracking, that doesn't really apply in this situation. This is really about one other thing that the representative, an important thing for us to have this is right now we have to audit 3% of continuing education, which takes time away from our analysts having to make those phone calls and track those things down. If we pass this, we have 100% auditability of everybody all the time. So nobody's going to get by, and in 10 years we figure out a nurse didn't get her CE. So that's another reason for this bill.
This is a department bill.
No, I mean, we would love it, but I mean, I wouldn't call it a department bill necessarily, but it'd be very helpful. And it will provide continuity, because right now we've done some of this by rule, but this would provide a baseline that moving forward, no matter who's in the Secretary's office, no matter who the boards are, they have to do this. That will help both the analysts and the licensees and the applicants.
Is this a software solution we're talking about? The bill refers to a solution. Do you have a software program set up to just hit on?
We do, and we've done some of this already by rule internally, but we would like to have the law so that we know it's there for the long term. We just went through a bidding process and had a winner. We had one group that actually came in for the bid. Several asked questions about it and came to the bidders conference, but only one actually filed.
So what's it going to cost you?
Nothing.
Free software.
Well,
All right.
the way it works is it's free for the baseline, but the applicants, or sorry, the licensees can choose to go to 2 higher levels and pay for concierge service where they go and find you the classes and gets you signed up and takes care of all that for you. And that's how the company gets their money. So it costs the state nothing and it costs the applicants, the licensees nothing.
Senator Dolezal, you're recognized. You want to ask Gabe a question or the author?
I think I was going to ask Gabe. I didn't know he was here when I first buzzed in, so I'm glad. I was going to ask why y'all can't do this already, but if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that essentially you want this in code so that this, I guess the free software vendor has certainty for the service they're going to provide over time will help them recoup.
That plus the licensees and the boards will know this solution will always be in place regardless of who sits in the office.
And so right now you guys aren't doing any sort of electronic submission of CE credits or anything like that?
We are. Individual boards were given they could do it, and we've only, in the last couple of years, decided, talking to the AG's office, that we could do this as a Secretary of State rule to put this in place, and that's why I put the bid out. But we would like the certainty of the law being in place and codifying it.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions by committee members? All right, I got one person signed up to speak. Tim Davis, GNA.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Tim Davis. I'm the Senior Director of Government Affairs at the Georgia Nurses Association. We are one of the professions whose board has decided to already opt into using a process like this. Overwhelmingly, our nurses don't have any problems with the process and are able to track their continuing education as they move forward towards relicensure. Why this is important to us, as Mr. Sterling alluded to, the manpower issue for the Secretary of State's office, allowing them to utilize a third-party repository like this and free up manpower for the processing of continuing education, the tracking of continuing education, and most specifically the audits will obviously give those people who are working in the Secretary of State's office more leeway to be able to address other issues related to licensure. As the profession, the most populous profession under the purview of the Secretary of State, we feel like this is something that will ultimately help nurses, and we would request your favorable consideration for the bill.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Davis? All right, nobody else has signed up to speak, or those that did waved off. So what is the pleasure of the committee? Got a motion to pass from Senator Albers and a second from Senator Sims. Any discussion or proposed amendments? All right, all in favor, raise your hand. And are there any opposed? All right, that's unanimous. Who would you like to carry your bill in the Senate?
I believe Senator Steele has agreed to carry it.
All right, if you would make a note of that, please, Paige. Thank you, pleasure to have you. We got you on our next agenda as well. We're not sure when that is yet. Might as well mention this now. We're scheduled for Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Is that right? 3 o'clock. I've been told by the Secretary of Senate's office that we may have conflicts with our budget appropriations subcommittee meetings that might shut us down, but that's my hope and goal that we'll be able to meet that day, but right now it isn't looking good. Also ask for some time on tomorrow, which is a committee day, and no room in the inn tomorrow either. So we're trying to find times that we can get y'all in.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Thank you for hearing that bill.
We'll make a point of that, and it's good to have you here. Mr.
Yes, sir.
Washington.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on down the list. What you got next there, Captain? I've got House Bill 51, Representative Burchett. And Mr. Leader, we're all square. You don't want to proceed with the sub on this one now? Okay. Committee members, this is, I think, identical to Senate Bill 13 that my vice chairman passed out of the Senate earlier. It deals with the gas lines under GFA grants. If you'll just explain it to us there, Mr. Wilt.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. House Bill 51 is identical to Senator Sumner's bill that was passed in this committee and on the Senate floor. What it seeks to do is allow for gas facilities and gas pipelines to be projects that can borrow money from GFA. And the issue that we're trying to handle here is in some of our, well, the issue was brought to me from the city of Douglas, who is tapped out on their gas service, and for them to upgrade, they're going to have to upgrade the main line, and they're going to do that via an authority, and they want to borrow the money from GFA and then pay back GFA when they construct the line, and that's the essence of the bill. It's not going to be constrained just to Coffee County, Douglas. Anyone would be able to utilize this, but that is the issue that we are trying to fix. The vote in the House was 120-55, and that's the gist of the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Was there any particular pushback, or we really didn't see any in the Senate version?
We had no pushback from any of the folks in the industry. In fact, the gas companies worked together with us to put in language so that their territory is protected. And the only pushback we saw was from, there was some testimony about the environment, and I can't really speak to what their argument was.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Y'all remember? All right. Got a motion to pass from Senator Ginn, a second from Senator Summers. Any discussion or further proposed amendments? All right. Very concise presentation. All in favor, raise your hand. Appears to be unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just to make sure, anybody against it, let's speak now, forever hold your peace. Thank you. Who would you like to carry that?
I'm hoping the Vice Chairman Summers will carry it.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure.
All right, you got it. Thank you for being here, Mr. Whip. Next on our agenda is House Bill 148, Representative Carson, who's traveling this afternoon. He's asked us to hold that bill. We will plan to put that down on our next committee meeting. That moves us down to Representative Stevens, House Bill 219.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, you may have remember this bill from last year. This had came in late, did not make it over the finish line, passed out of the House. And what this bill does is it is an impairment bill to allow the same procedures that we use for dentists and doctors and pharmacists that allows for counseling. They give up their license and voluntarily, and they go to get counseling and treatment so that they can get back into the workforce. You might recall this is two different sections. It's the Composite Board of Professional Counselors, Social Workers, and Family Therapists, and then the other section beginning on 5 has to do with the Georgia Board of Nursing. They would give up their license, again, go through treatment, and depending on the board's favorable consideration to monitor those long term and of course get back into the workforce. All the cost of this is going to be borne on the person that is being treated, so there should not be a cost, even though the program can accept private donations and others. And Mr. Chairman, that's the essence of the bill.
Is this any different than last year's? I remember it well.
Word for word.
So what happened last year?
It was very, very late. Our fault. We got started late, and we got it out of the committee. Very favorable. There's really no opposition to it. It came out of the House both times quite easily. We just, honestly, it got tied up late.
Okay. I see you passed 168-0.
Yes, sir.
In the House this year. I remember it passing our committee. Any questions by committee members? All right. What's the pleasure of the committee? Got a motion do pass by Senator Summers and a second by Senator Rett. Any discussion or proposed amendments? All right. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, same sign. Who do you want to carry this year, Dr. Rett?
I was going to ask him, are you going to gamble on seeing if you get past the finish line this time?
Not the same gamble. Yeah, it's snake eyes. I hope not.
Who you want to carry? Are you going to gamble on Dr. Rett, or are you going to pick somebody else?
You know what? Dr. Rett would be a good one to carry it. If he'd do that, that'd be great.
You know, I carried my first session here. I carried a bill for him, and it passed. It was my first bill, but it got vetoed. I just thought I'd let you know that.
This is a good bill.
Don't push it up.
It does deal with people with impairments, so you might be just right for it.
Thank you,
we'll
Mr.
let
Chairman.
you carry that.
Members of the committee, thank you so much.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate having you. Yeah. Mr. Leader, you're up.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I bring to you today House Bill 416. So years ago, I carried legislation to revitalize the area known here in downtown Atlanta as the Gulch. So it's an area that had suffered from chronic underdevelopment for a period of 2+ decades, that there was a commitment at the time to make a $400 million potentially plus investment in the area, and a recognition from all involved that something needed to be done to address that area of downtown Atlanta. This is the area with railroad tracks kind of below the ground, really lack of options without substantial investment in order to allow for economic development in the area. So I carried that legislation. I was a floor leader at the time, but it was relatively non-controversial at the time when I carried it here at the Capitol. Recognition, bipartisan recognition, something needed to be done. Well, subsequent to that, a key component of it was approval by the local government, and turned out to be very controversial with when it went before the local government for consideration. And as a result, Mr. Chairman, the next steps it was very delayed in its implementation, which then has had an impact of delaying the benefits that were to come from the proposed legislation, because that frankly was not anticipated. That it would take several years through the political process and related litigation to get to the point of where we are right now. So House Bill 416 is an attempt to address that, really recognize the realities that occurred after this legislation was passed. It would create an enterprise zone which could exist anywhere in the state that meets the criteria, but the criteria was set so that it would fit for the Gulch redevelopment. And that redevelopment's underway right now. We're just asking that that the law that was passed be updated, reflecting the needs that this reset timeline has required. Additionally, there is a potential loophole which would have allowed for businesses that were not located in the Gulch from utilizing this for transactions that are conducted within the zone, if that makes sense. We have not seen that be a problem yet, but just to make sure that there's no issue with that, we close that loophole here to make that clear. And I'll just finally tell the committee, as I said in the House, this is in keeping with the original intent, explanation as to the need to the bill. There's no new, in my mind, no new policy ground that's being treaded here. We are just trying to stick to the original intent and objective of the legislation that I carried approximately 7 or 8 years ago. And I would ask for the committee's favorable consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So it looks like one thing you're doing is you're just extending the time for when the bonds kick in. There was a small bond for $100,000, and now when the rest of the money kicks in or gets bonded, you'll have 30 years from that date to recoup it.
Yes, sir. That's effectively it in summary. I think the objective for the dollar threshold was just when there's comparatively substantive bonds that are to be issued, that would be the point at which the clock would start.
What's the cost of the project? Do you know what the total amount of those bonds will be?
I do not. There may be a witness in here who can answer that, but I do think that obviously to fit the criteria, the investment has to be greater than $400 million. And so this is substantial investment, obviously near Mercedes-Benz Stadium, State Farm Arena, critical area of our capital city. And I'll also just say I have worked on legislation. I have a different bill that I'm also working on just concerning the redevelopment of downtown Atlanta to ensure that as we have the World Cup coming in 2026 and we have other major events coming to our state, that we're able to showcase what a great, amazing capital city we have. And I believe that House Bill 416 is very much in keeping with that.
Is the game plan to have this ready for the World Cup when that comes rolling into town?
So, Mr. Chairman, there may be witnesses in here that can speak to it, but I do think the Centennial Yards development, some of the other developments that have been underway are in keeping with that, right? Because we passed the legislation a few years ago, because the investments are already coming in, that we are going to be seeing redevelopment in this area. It may not be the whole thing, but we're going to be seeing redevelopment in time for these major events.
Okay. Questions by committee members. Senator Albers, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Leader F-Stration. I remember when you passed this many years ago, and certainly it's been transformational down there. Do you remember what the impact to the state was back when you originally passed this through, what the fiscal impact was?
I do not, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Yeah.
It'd be great if we could perhaps get that sometime in the near future. And I don't think that's changing necessarily in this bill, but just for everybody's edification, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. I'll work on that, and my office will get that information out of the committee members.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Summers, you're recognized for a question.
Mr. Leader, thank you for the bill. I like your bill. Is this Trump opportunity zones, if there are in the area, or is it sort, if you will?
So the enterprise zone term was utilized in the bill and is separate from any federal use of that term, but it was a unique classification for us in the state of Georgia at the time to classify the area this way. And but the question was put to me, does this only apply to the Atlanta? And the answer is no. If the criteria is met in other parts of the state, it could be available there. It's just the Gulch was the one site where this was possible.
Thank you for saying that, because I believe in my area I have the Enterprise easy zones. I think it was under Clinton administration when they first came out, so that's good if it can be applied.
Yes, sir. I think the component often there is the desire for substantial investment, this $400 million investment. This is
a visual video that Robert Highsmith sent us and Marcy Rubinson earlier today. And I don't have other questions for you, but stay handy. And Robert Highsmith,
yes,
by mental telepathy, has signed up to speak to this. I know he wants to, but he didn't. He used invisible ink on this thing. You got a question?
Is that a picture of the future city of Mulberry that we're looking at?
Mayberry.
Mulberry is one of our other outstanding cities in Georgia. No, I'm speaking of our capital city, Atlanta, right now. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. If you'll stand by, Mr. Leader. Mr. Highsmith, give us a little background. You've come to me to sort of explain it, and I'll be carrying this bill, assuming it passes committee in the Senate. So back us up, days of Kasim Reed, when the plan came together. I believe Leader F-Stration was a floor leader for Nathan Deal at the time when they presented this to us.
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. Robert Highsmith. We've represented CIM Group, which is the developer of what was formerly known as the Gulch, now known as Centennial Yards. In 2015, when the ownership of the Hawks, and you see the new State Farm Arena depicted on this graphic that you, Mr. Chairman, asked me to provide for the committee. When the ownership of the Hawks changed, they said, well, we've got this giant hole in the ground next to the federal building that you see there on the right. Mercedes-Benz Stadium was under construction. What had been Phillips Arena would become State Farm Arena. All that was under construction, but there was this literally hole in the ground, and the only use was the surface parking there in what was known as the Gulch. We'd cataloged some 12 previous efforts to redevelopment that had failed simply because the raising up that approximately 40-acre area up to viaduct level where the streets currently are, Centennial, Olympic Drive, Martin Luther King, Mitchell, the cost was just too prohibitive. And so even though it's right there in the middle of downtown in Atlanta, no one had developed it. To your question, Senator Albers, it was generating no tax revenue for the state because it was owned by a railroad utility and was parking, on which the state doesn't charge sales tax. So as Leader F-Stration says, working with the Deal administration, created changes to the enterprise zone code to allow for this type of development and the issuance of bonds to fund the infrastructure. And Mr. Chairman, as you noted in your question, the idea of issuing 30-year bonds to fund the project was appealing. That's sort of a standard term for infrastructure bonds of this sort. And so the legislation provided for a 30-year period for the incentive. But as Leader F-Stration stated, there was delay, there was litigation around the project. Ultimately, the Georgia Supreme Court, in a unanimous vote, affirmed the project and the financing mechanisms that it relied on under the legislation that Leader F-Stration had carried. And so the project is now vertical. We can go out there now and see that some of what you see in this graphic has already beginning to happen. They're already starting to top buildings. The infrastructure is developing. Bonds were only issued, though, Mr. Chairman, last year. And so the idea is to have, is to have a 30-year period for those bonds.
What do you think they're going to be? What's the total amount of bonds?
The total amount outstanding bonds right now, as I did go back and look after we spoke, Mr. Chairman, is $358 million that was issued last year in what are called EZ bonds. The total amount of investment in the project, I think that was also your question, Mr. Chairman. The investment in the project is expected to possibly reach $5 billion once it's fully developed out. Now that's a lot of development, but that's the estimate of what Centennial Yards will eventually invest in this development downtown. And as Leader Efstration said, the existing legislation requires a very, very substantial private investment. It has to be a minimum of $400 million. And the Department of Community Affairs has to certify, and did certify when the project started, that the area is chronically underdeveloped for a period of 20 years. And so the DCA makes that analysis before any project could use the mechanism that Leader Efstration's legislation created.
So everybody in Atlanta can verify it has not been developed in 20 years. It's just a big old hole in the ground. And gulch was the perfect word for it.
We like calling it Centennial Yards now, Mr. Chairman, but it was a gulch for decades with nothing but some surface parking and weedy pavement. That's literally all that was there in an area that, again, State Farm Arena, the federal courthouse building, and Mercedes-Benz all surrounding the area that's being developed.
On the $400 million threshold, is that private investment or the $368 million
No, sir.
in bonds?
There has to be $400 million in private investment before this incentive even becomes available and that's under existing law, Mr. Chairman, that was passed when Leader Efstration carried the legislation in 2017.
Okay. Questions from other committee members? Senator Albers, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Robert, thank you for the update. Obviously, all the railroads were in that area for many, many years. Was that a Superfund site for cleanup?
I'm not certain, Senator. I don't think so. I think in the years that we've spent getting all the real estate straightened out down there, I think that would have come across that. It is, however, there is active freight rail there. MARTA has tracked there, and so part of the cost of the development, frankly, was to build all this on top of all that so that you wouldn't interfere with existing freight rail and other operations.
Are they still there now? Still operational, the railroad tracks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're going to build up above that somehow?
Exclusively, Mr.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Senator Albers.
No, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. What do you think about that, Senator Lucas? About the money?
It's all about money.
All right. Other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you for being with us. Appreciate that little history walk through the past. Yes, all right. What's the will of the committee?
Move to pass.
Second.
Got a move to pass from Senator Lucas and second from Senator Albers. Any discussion or proposed amendments to it? All right. Let's all raise your hand if you're in favor. Any opposed? Same sign. That is unanimous.
I was going to give it to you.
I'm happy to carry that for you if you still want me to. And
I thought you seconded it.
probably want to circle up with you a little bit and with
That's all right. I gave it to you.
Highsmith to make sure I
Frankie.
have our right cross-references to the codes and make sure I don't misstate anything that I understand as well as you do. We'll circle up. Okay. All right. Some of you here were signed up for that bill. What was that, 219? I had 4 or 5 other people signed up. All were in favor of the bill. And given that there was no discussion or questions, that was Representative Stevens. I didn't call on y'all. Your bill passed unanimously, so we didn't need you. But Jeff, good. Thank y'all for coming. I just felt like in interest of time, since it was universal support, we'd move that one on. Nobody else signed up on 416. I also have on our agenda House Bill 314, Representative LaHood's bill on the licensing of athletic trainers. He has asked me to please hold that bill. I've got 2 people signed up. He had problems with some witness in support of the bill being here today, and since it's his bill and he doesn't want it to move forward, I told him we'd fit him in as we can. I don't think it's fair to hear the cons on that bill without him being here to defend himself. So we're going to hold that one until our next available meeting. Paige, you got my list of what I'm telling you we want to do next meeting? Thought I might give him a little heads up. Okay.
13th, if we have one, we have 148, 184, 183, or 185.
180. All right, we don't know our next date. 187. Okay, so here's the bills that have been requested for me to have hearings on by the authors, and this would be in addition to the ones that were skipped over today. I've been asked to have House Bill 148, House Bill 180, and House Bill 185, and I'm planning to have those at my next available meeting. Long shot chance it's this Thursday. If not, hopefully it'll be next week. I have also promised the authors of House Bill 187 and 447 that they will be heard next Tuesday, presuming we're allowed to meet. So just make your notes so you can be here if you're here to testify. That's what we're going to do. 187 and 447 on Tuesday of next week, 148, 180, and 185 on this next meeting, whenever that may be, and we just don't know till it gets here. 314 is going to be held over as well, so you'd add that to the list for the next available meeting. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you for being here.
Good job, Mr. Chairman.
Made some progress.